Hi, thank you for coming. Thank you, Creative Time, and Pasternak, Nato Thompson, and of course, Shane, for making this program and inviting me to present a regional report on Mexico. Okay. So I've actually lived in New York for about 12 years, and I've only been a year and a half in Mexico City. As Nato said, I've been working at a museum called Museo Tamayo, a contemporary arts institution. That museum has focused primarily in international arts, although in the last year and a half that I've been there, obviously, I've related to a number of artists that I will talk about. Just in case some people don't know about Mexico, I think that it's just important to situate it in the map. Just in case. Okay. Anyway, I will continue. So Mexico has the second largest border. There is about 3,107 kilometers at borders with the United States. Obviously, you may have related to some extent with the country. Further along the presentation, I will talk about a number of artists that primarily work in Mexico City, which is the city's capital. I can't make a regional report of the entire country because although I am from the north, I haven't lived there for a long time. However, the artists that I'm focusing, which will be 4, and specifically one with each project, are not only working in Mexico City, although they're based there, they're working in Ciudad Juárez, which is a city that borders Texas, and Culiacán, Sinaloa, a city that is on the Pacific coast near the Gulf. Mexico City's population, just to give you a sense, is around 9 million within the center and 23 million people if you count the immediate suburbs. The city's center, which I will present with you a couple of images, is actually built within the empire of the indigenous people there. So while you have the church or the Zócalo, you can also see ruins and pyramids just before. So I suppose I skipped a slide. The 20th century was a very important modernization process, not only for the city of Mexico, but the country as a whole, as it happened in many countries. Just last month, we celebrated the bicentennial of Mexico's independence, and next month we will be celebrating 100 years of the Mexican Revolution. Part of the Mexican Revolution's program was very much working with artists to create what was called, politically speaking, a cultural identity. I think that one of the things that Mexico differs from many other countries, and that was part of that same program of cultural identity, is the construction of art institutions, and not only the support or the direct support to artists to produce new work. So there are close to 2,000 museums in the country, of which 99% of them are funded by the state. And from almost those 2,000 museums, there's close to 200 museums, 132 to be exact, that are functioning within Mexico City. This is the most well-known, which is Palacio de Bellas Artes, which also hosts an opera house. The Munal, which is the National Museum of the Fine Arts, which used to be the Secretary of Communications. The Anthropology Museum, which was inaugurated in the 1960s, as many other museums, including the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico, that presents a history of the country and of indigenous people to the present day in an amazing scenography. Part of the interesting aspect of the museums in Mexico and of the participation of the state and the relationship and support to artists is that one of the things that artists have done, particularly of the 20th century, has been to donate their work, their homes, and pretty much their legacy, including the image rights, to the state. So we have a number of museums that were either created by artists or homes by artists and studios that were donated to the state. The one that passed quite quickly was actually the museum where I work, founded by Rufina and Olga Tamayo in 1981. The two images that you see here are the home in Polanco on the left-hand side of Siqueiros, the muralist, and on the right-hand side of Diego Rivera, both of which are operating as museums. Barragan, the architect, also donated his home. And once again, for me, it's important to lay out the scene so that you understand that the relationship of artists to the state or of the state with artists has been quite mutual and based on reciprocity. In the last 8 years, 10 years maybe, there's been a new form of institution created which has a lot to do or to challenge the state in terms of collection formation and how one builds history. The first museum of the kind is Fundación Colección Jumex, which is actually, Jumex is a factory juice company where they've used one of the storage spaces to create a contemporary arts institution. I want to backtrack to the foundation of the Museo Tamayo, which is where I work. The first 5 years of that museum, from 1981 to 1986, it was actually the private museum of Mexico, focused again in contemporary arts. It was co-founded by the television company, which at that point was a monopoly, called Televisa, and Grupo Alfa, which was a group of finance people, and that together with the artist created the institution in a land donated by the state within the Chapultepec Park, which is like Central Park here in New York. But 5 years after it was founded, the artist disagreed with how the corporations were running the museum and asked the president of the country to nationalize the museum. Another museum that recently opened, only 2 years ago, is the Museum of Contemporary Art at the university. It's called MUAC. And this museum, which was also designed by Teodoro González de León, one of the two architects that designed the Tamayo Museum, was founded 2 years ago within the City University campus, and it's run by the national university called UNAM. The most recent museum that's under construction and will open at the end of the year is the Sumaya Museum. The architect is Fernando Romero, and the owner of the museum and of the collection is Carlos Slim, the most rich man in the world. The richest man in the world. But the point of this is to say that artists everywhere in Mexico, just only a couple of months ago, even the currency, the 500 peso bill, which is like $40, if you get a sense of that, has a portrait of Frida Kahlo and another of Diego Rivera. There's art not only at museums. Obviously, if you've been part of the history, you understand that muralism is also the idea of bringing art into the streets and reflecting it back. So buildings, avenues, and now currency have art. So very quickly, I will pass on to talk about 4 artists, which some of are known, like Teresa Margolles and Pedro Reyes, as well as artists like Abraham Cruz Villegas and Claudia Fernandez, and I will talk about 2 initiatives. SOMA, which is an art school, very different from the ones that were discussed here today, and Paz Usted. From Teresa Margolles, I want to talk specifically about a work that she did last year in the Venice Biennial. She represented Mexico, big controversy in the country, within Mexico and not exactly Venice. But the work that I want to discuss is called Limpieza Cleansing, in which the artist used water from cleaning the streets where most of the dead people are. One of the things that is always important to take in mind is that Mexico, actually, the government has declared a state of war, and it's the war against drugs. So Teresa used the water that she used to clean a number of people, particularly of deaths in public spaces and in streets in the city of Culiacán and the city of Ciudad Juárez, to collect the waters and then use a mop and to clean every day in a performance the pavilion. She's used water in different ways. At PS1, about 8 years ago in a Mexico City exhibition, there was a vapor room in which the water that she used at that point, and in bubbles as well, was water that she collected from cleansing bodies in public morgues. She no longer uses that in public morgues. She particularly uses the water in the streets. Artist Pedro Reyes, I will talk about one single work, although it's worth looking at his entire body of work to place him. He's one of the most interesting artists working in Mexico City today. The project that he's done is Palas contra Balas, which means something around shovels or guns for shovels. A set of shovels that he used after collecting weapons, specifically guns, that were voluntarily given to the city of Culiacan officials after a number of TV ads that the artist placed, and then went on to a process to reshape. The shovels exist within the gallery space, but the viewers or the audience are able to take them and together with them plant the tree. Oops, the S is falling, but that's Abraham Cruz Villegas. Abraham Cruz Villegas is an artist that is based in Mexico City, at the time doing a residency in Berlin as part of the DAAD. He recently did a performance that was based on his parents and his own growing up neighborhood, which is a place that's called of paracaidistas, which means the word in English where you go and sleep in a building that's not yours, which I can't remember. A squatter, exactly. And the play is based on a number of collaborations with about 30 artists, where each artist collaborated by making a prop, and then based on the prop, creating the script for the performance. As you could see from the artworks that I'm presenting and the artists, I'm very interested in artists that are socially engaged and working not only with their direct community, which are artists, but also with television, politicians, and a group of other people that get involved in the project, but that the works can exist within the gallery space and outside of it. Claudia Fernandez is another example of this. She works, she's been working for about 7 years with children that are homeless in the streets of Mexico, and creates with a number of financial support from anyone from Francis Alice to Colección Jumex, to hire specialists in design and in sculpture and create artworks with the kids that are in the street, particularly with materials that are found on the street, so pretty much a kind of recycling of stuff, and then creates fine objects and fashion shows that are presented at museums. This is the Museo Tamayo. The revenue for the selling of all these objects that the children create obviously go back to the children, and there's been a high percentage, 30% from the children that she's worked, the homeless kids, that have been so-called reincorporated back into society. The last two things are two initiatives. Soma, which is an art school that was founded just a year ago by two artists, Yoshua Kohn and Eduardo Baroa. They have a residency space with 2 apartments and a studio, and also give about 3 to 6 courses each semester. They are not only 2 artists that have done all the fundraising, the renovation of the space, but also that lead the curricula, but also a number of the artists that are being involved both in the residency space and locally that teach artists. Very much in conversation with some of the presentations of schools today, one of the things that Soma does is try to create an alternative directly to what the art schools in the country do, which is pretty much present academy. And by that I mean traditional classes of painting, of drawing, and of Mexican art history. What Eduardo and Yoshua try to do with Soma, and through the residency program within Soma, is try to present perspectives from outside, workshop-based, studio-based, discussion-based. They, a lot of the revenues that they do is from individual fundraising, but they also have a bar downstairs. Every Wednesday they do a public program, which tends to be packed. They are also artist talks and so on. The idea also of the space is that they can rent it, and with that, once again, be able to fund the place. The last initiative that I want to talk about, and I would say that one of the most inspiring things since I've arrived to Mexico, is a group of 7 young designers, architects, computer programmers called Pase Usted. Pase Usted began organizing a series of pechacuchas. They've been operating for the last 2 years, and then they went on to organize more organized forums such as this one on education, sustainability, ecology, and so on. Their latest project is one called Genera. This is artist Minerva Cuevas, by the way, another socially engaged artist from Mexico. Genera is a grant that they've opened up nationwide and internationally as well. They've just finished their first year of programming, in which they invite artists and regular citizens to propose projects that could better the country. And they identify venture capitalists that could actually invest, at least for the pilot program, for these projects to take place. So just to mention at the end, I think that the best thing in Mexico are the artists, not exactly culture as such, but artists and what they do. And I think that this group of people will change the country in the years to come. Thanks.
We're going to take not a 10-minute, but a 5-minute break.